An unimaginable story, and an unsolved incident unfolded during the Soviet-Japanese War. This story is known by very few. However, today you will find out what happened. Sit comfortably and watch this extremely interesting video. Also, your likes will help the video become more visible. On August 8, 1945, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan, and the very next day launched a large-scale offensive on Manchuria. This was a rapid and well-organized operation, aimed at destroying Japan's Kwantung Army and returning Manchuria to China. Manchuria was historically Chinese territory, but in 1931, the Japanese Empire occupied it and created a puppet state called Manchukuo. The Japanese deployed the Kwantung Army in the region, which was considered Japan's most powerful force in continental Asia. In this storming of Manchuria, the 6th Guards Tank Army participated, consisting of the 22nd, 44th, and 45th Tank Brigades. When the 22nd Tank Army breached the front line from the western side, the Japanese army collapsed, soldiers fled, and many surrendered. Soviet forces managed to capture 1,800 Japanese soldiers as prisoners. Additionally, some Japanese soldiers performed harakiri. The battles had not yet ceased when 25 tanks first broke down and then exploded spontaneously. This threw the 22nd Tank Brigade into complete shock and caused major chaos. However, by this time, the Japanese no longer had the strength to resist the Soviet army. All of this was reported to General Rodion Malinovsky, who commanded the 22nd Tank Brigade. Upon arriving at the scene, he encountered 25 completely destroyed tanks. At that time, the Japanese were not nearby, and for Malinovsky, it was incomprehensible how these tanks had been destroyed. When they began interrogating soldiers and officers, they literally could not answer anything. Everyone repeated the same thing. The tanks suddenly stopped and after a few seconds, exploded on their own. General Malinovsky thought this might be some new Japanese technology. Malinovsky ordered the Soviet officers to bring Japanese officers' 3rd Kwantung Army for interrogation. They found only 2 officers. The rest had either been liquidated or had performed harakiri. One of the officers was Shigeru Sawa, who was wounded in the leg and shoulder. When Malinovsky began asking questions, Shigeru responded with evasive words and demanded to be given a tanto, a Japanese short sword, to perform harakiri. Malinovsky promised that if he answered all questions, he would fulfill the request. If not, he would spend his entire life in a Soviet prison. Shigeru asked what he was interested in, specifically. Malinovsky strictly asked what secret weapon the Japanese army possessed that destroyed 25 Soviet tanks in seconds. Shigeru said Japan had no secret weapons. Shigeru also told Malinovsky that 3 months earlier, they had lost 50 soldiers who simply disappeared from their positions without a trace. They also witnessed strange events in the sky, specifically flying objects that moved rapidly across the sky. The Japanese thought these were Soviet high-tech flying objects. Soon, you will see video footage of these objects that no one has seen until today. Malinovsky asked him what these specific objects looked like. Shigeru said some were cylinder-shaped, others triangular. He also said they tried many times to shoot down these objects but without success. What happened to Shigeru Sawa afterwards remains unknown to us. Something very interesting awaits you, my friends. A few days later, these objects were also spotted by Soviet troops themselves in the sky. You are now seeing the rarest footage filmed in Ikihar, Manchuria. As you can see in this video, these objects have cylindrical and triangular shapes. The fact is that humanity did not possess such flying objects in 1945. However, those who watch my videos know where these objects come from. New viewers are advised to watch my other videos. Let's return to the main topic. On September 10th, 1945, a certain number of Soviet troops left Manchuria. As written in documents when leaving Manchuria, they repeatedly noticed strange flying objects in the sky, as if these objects were following them. This information reached General Andrei Kravchenko, commander of the 6th Guards Tank Army of the Soviet Union. He then reported it to the Kremlin. It is said that even Stalin himself received this information. An order was issued from the Kremlin to investigate what phenomenon the Soviet army had encountered at that time. When they began researching the exploded tanks, no traces of shell impacts or anything similar were found on the tanks, which further bewildered the Soviet command in Manchuria. Many Japanese were interrogated, but they also had no answers to the questions. These objects did not appear again after the capture of Manchuria. However, strange events shifted to Belarusian territory, specifically near a dead lake in the forest. In 1947, near the lake, a village resident, Vladislav Matvienko, while hunting, noticed 2 or 3 armed soldiers of Asian appearance. As soon as he returned to the village, he rode his horse to a small town called Narokh, where he informed the police that he had seen 2 or 3 people in the forest dressed as soldiers, speaking an unfamiliar language. The Narokh police headed to the lake. A total of 7 militiamen were involved in the search. They began searching for these Asian individuals in the forest. 2 dogs were also involved in the search. The police split into 2 groups and agreed to meet in the village by nightfall. 4 militiamen returned to the village, but 3 never came back. When evening fell, Police Colonel Yaroslav Moroz, who led this operation, decided to report the incident to the main department. At night, the police returned to the department. After returning, Moroz contacted the main police department and reported everything. At dawn, 2 Zilbrand vehicles arrived in Narokh. The vehicles were filled with soldiers, led by Major Vasily Klebovich. The number of soldiers, together with the police, totaled 30 men. Klebovich ordered that, if they felt any danger, they should immediately open fire. The search squad split into 2. 15 men headed north, and the other 15-men squad went south. 2 hours later, intense gunfire was heard. Major Klebovich was not present where the shooting was occurring. Klebovich and 14 soldiers rushed to the area from which the gunshots were heard. The shooting continued for 10 minutes and suddenly stopped. When they arrived at the shooting site, Belarusian soldiers captured 2 Japanese soldiers. Third was already liquidated. 4 Belarusian soldiers were also wounded. Klebovich was very confused. He had no idea what 3 Japanese soldiers wanted on Soviet Belarusian territory. Since no one knew Japanese, they could not communicate. Both captured Japanese soldiers were lightly wounded. They tried to use gestures to ask the Japanese what they had done to the 3 missing policemen. However, they could not understand each other at all. Klebovich decided to transport the Japanese to Narokh, from where he would contact Minsk and report this strange incident. At that time, the so-called MVD chief was Mikhail Ivanovich Basakov. Personally, he took charge of the case. As for the fate of the 3 missing policemen, I have no information and unfortunately could not find any. Basakov began interrogating the Japanese with a translator. Basakov's first question was how these Japanese soldiers ended up on Belarusian territory and way exactly near this lake. One of the Japanese prisoners was named Kazuki Ito. Kazuki told Basakov that they did not even know they were on Belarusian territory. Ito also said that when Soviet troops invaded Manchuria, they blacked out during the battle, and when they regained consciousness, they found themselves in a forest near the lake. Until they were captured, they had no idea they were in Belarus. They also could not remember how they lost consciousness. As for the other Japanese prisoner, he was concussed and could not speak. Basakov also asked how they survived. Ito said, they sometimes hunted and sometimes fished. They also had a small garden where they grew vegetables. They built a small hut and lived in it. When this story reached the Kremlin, it was immediately linked to the strange events in Manchuria related to the unidentified flying objects and the destroyed tanks. The fate of these 2 Japanese soldiers remains unknown, and nothing is written in the files. It will be interesting to hear your opinion on how these Japanese ended up so far from China on Belarusian territory. Share your thoughts in the comments.